Hello, everyone. Very excited again to be here today on another episode of Conversational Witchcraft. Today, we are chatting with Kimberly Sherman-Cook. She is a pagan minister, high priestess, occult author, and teacher. She is the co-founder, director, and teacher of the Pagan Education Network, whose mission from 2005 to 2015 was to help educate people interested. My screen just locked out on me. See, and that's why it's great we have a producer because he can fix this. Uh, whose mission from 2005 to 2015 was to help educate people interested in meditation, workshops, and occult spiritual practices. In 2005, Kimberly also founded the Raven Star Coven, which ran until 2015. She holds a master's degree in education and a BA in English associate degree in psychology. Oh, this is going to be a fun interview. Kimberly strives to help students to see themselves as successful in an environment where they would otherwise find criticism. When she's not working, she can be found writing, reading tarot, and spending time at the beach or hiking on Nantucket. Hello, Kimberly.
Oh,
Hello, and welcome to the show. It's a rainy morning here in New England. You're in New England too, right?
I am in New England too. It was perfect. I was like, oh great, we're in the same time zone.
Yeah, yeah. I was like when I realized that you were like in my neck of the woods, I was like, oh, she's a New Englander too. I'm
That's
up
right.
here in New Hampshire. Are you down by Nantucket?
I am in Massachusetts, but not by Nantucket. I'm actually in more the central portion of
Yep,
Massachusetts, so yeah,
yeah.
right underneath you.
Right, right. But hello, hello. We my husband and I are New York transplants. So
Okay.
you'll hear it. The more relaxed I get, my New York will come out. But we moved originally to Massachusetts because when we took our honeymoon in Salem and Salem, Mass, because
Yeah.
that's the kind of people we are, obviously. And I just fell in love with everything New England at that time.
Did
And
you
when
come in
we
the
moved,
fall?
right, oh God, at the fall, yes, yes.
So that's why I fell in love.
Yeah. Are you a native New Englander? Are you born and raised here?
I am a native New Englander. Yep, I'm born and
Amazing,
raised.
amazing. And people from New England think that people from New England are rude. Like Massachusetts people think that Massachusetts people are rude, but as a New Yorker, I will tell you, New England people are not rude. Like
No, if
New,
you spend some time in New York, it's a different
yeah,
flavor.
absolutely, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about growing up in New England, because there's a lot of witch energy in New England, right? I've interviewed
Yeah,
a lot of folks that grow up, in the deep South or in the Midwest, and they kind of have to search for the witchy stuff and the pagan stuff.
yeah.
What was that like for you growing up here where things are a little bit more witchy?
So I like being a kid growing up. I feel like the New England energy and the New England vibe is just right. It's old and there's a lot, right? There's a lot
Mhm.
going on the land and stuff. So I feel like you're always kind of connected to it, whether you're connected to it or not. But I was
Mm.
actually raised Catholic, so I spent a lot of time in my early childhood, like inside of a church, wondering why you could only have God in the church. Because I'm weird
Same.
like that. I thought about all these
Yeah.
things.
Same, same, same.
And then yeah, as I got a little older, of course, everybody hears about Salem Mass, and that's like a big, I feel like it's a big deal. Although if you live in Massachusetts and you grew up in New England, you're like, yeah, okay, Salem. I mean,
Right,
it's still fun, but I
right,
think it's a different thing because it's right in our backyard. People
right.
come from like Texas or like the Midwest or things like that, and they're like, oh, and you're like, okay, sure, yeah, I guess. Like,
Right.
so yeah, so I mean, I grew up, going to the beaches and just. I'm also like a Wicked history buff, so I loved all the history. So of course,
Mm.
I read a lot about the Salem witch trials and all of those things, even like as a teenager, like 10, 11, 12, even in that area, like fascinated me, completely fascinated me. So yeah,
Right.
so I don't know. Growing up, I think my growing up was probably early years was probably a lot like everybody else's, but I definitely feel like there's a different vibe in New England, and if you're sensitive to that at all, pick up on it from an early age.
Yeah, I feel like there's a pull.
Mm-hmm.
I can so similarly, I grew up on Long Island in New York, right? And Long Islanders joke about it and say, well, we live in the shadow of the greatest city in the world. We never go. Like, I'm a native New Yorker who's never been to the Statue of Liberty. And
Right?
right, because you're like, it's right, it's
Yeah,
there.
like
So
it's right
probably
there.
right. So that probably the same way you guys feel about Salem. Like, who cares? The weirdos are in Salem. And I'm like, hi, I'm a weirdo. Um, but my first trip to Salem was on my honeymoon.
Yeah.
And like literally we stayed in the Salem Inn because the Hawthorne was booked.
Well, of course, you got to do
Totally,
that.
we didn't know it was going to be, but it was October. It was, and there's a pull. I
Yeah,
literally can, and like, even when I go there now, like just to hang out, there's a pull that kind of comes for me. It comes from the gut, and I feel like I'm connected
yeah.
to something. And it's not just in Salem. I find that happens in most of New England. Can you remember your first visit to Salem? And did you feel anything specific?
So it's a funny story, actually. My first like official visit to Salem was in high school,
Mm.
and we had read the Scarlet Letter, and so we had to go for that purpose. At that point, I was already exploring witchcraft, and I was already very steeped in, like that whole. So we're talking like I was probably like 15, maybe 16 at the time.
Mhm.
So I had already been exploring this for probably about 3 or 4 years at that point. Witchcraft in general, like just kind of sucking up all of the information I could get my hands on, at the local library and different things. So my first experience was with a friend of mine, traveling through Salem. And of course, we were given some free time. And, what did we do but hit every witch shop there was? Because what else do you do at 15 when you're enamored with this idea that religion doesn't have to happen inside the church and something has pulled you that is like so much larger, right, than you understand? So yeah, so it was a blast. We had so much fun. And of course, the friend of mine was not really into the craft or any of that. So he was like, just, like, what are we doing here? And I was like, oh, let's go talk to real witches and like find out all about this. So, so I was just as much of a tourist at 15 and like Googling all of that,
Yeah.
energy. And it's also very overwhelming though. I will tell you that. Like, so, all of my experiences in Salem, I've been on Halloween. I've never been to the big ball, but I have been to, all of the areas in Halloween and in the fall and all of those things. And it's definitely an overwhelming energy sometimes because of all of the touristy, stuff that's going on. But it's also, there is a draw, there's definitely a draw. That was actually when I was like convinced that's it. Like, this is my world.
When
you
you were
know,
like 15 and you're like, oh, this is where I belong. Like
yeah,
this
I was like,
is,
oh, it's my people. Like, it's all the weirdos like
yes,
me.
yes, we are the weirdos, mister. Like that's 100%. I have to agree with that 100%. And yeah, I tell people like, don't go to Salem in October at all. Don't do it.
Right.
It just, I know that sounds like it's going to be fun, but I don't know, it's too people-y and it's not the right people.
No, it's not the right people.
It's still the right people. Go the week after Halloween. Like go
Yeah.
the first week of November or go like the
Right.
last week in September where everything is still fall and wonderful,
Yeah, and
but
pumpkins and all that. Yeah.
the tourists are gone because the
Yeah.
feeling is still there. So
It is. Well, and you get a different feeling. So it's a very different vibe, right? I say there's like two Salems. There's like
yeah,
Halloween Salem, which is like, show hands and all that. And then there's real Salem, which if
yeah,
you want to see real Salem, you do exactly that, right? You go in the off time. I actually love to go in the spring. I don't know if you've ever been down there in the spring, but
yeah.
it's amazing in the spring too. And it is quieter, and you actually get to talk to some of the shopkeepers and just experience it on a different, I feel like, more true level. And there are some really great people out there. I know people have different opinions about, the witches of Salem, but
Yeah.
I've met some really, really amazing people over the years there, and some shopkeepers that truly have a knack for what they do. And I've had some great experiences. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like maybe we're of the same generation where when we were coming up and finding witchcraft and finding paganism, like you said, you touched on earlier, said you were, in your teens and you were all over the library because we didn't have TikTok and Instagram to learn witchcraft from.
yeah, there was no YouTube tutorial.
Correct. So like we were literally like searching out, and there was like no real internet to even look up these shops. So a friend of a friend of a friend would say, oh, there's a shop 4 towns over from you and they sell crystals. And you'd be like,
Right.
maybe I can get a ride there. You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Exactly.
that's how we learned. So you
Right.
go to Salem and you actually have, it's like a mecca of all these different shops, and you can really connect with people. I think that there's a value in the learning of craft from others,
Right.
and that's such a great way to do it in person. And it's also great because you can feel somebody's vibe,
Yeah.
like you can walk into a store and be like, this isn't
Yep.
my vibe, and then go to the one next door and you're like, oh, my people,
Right. You're like, oh, this is my vibe. Right. It's kind
right.
of like cooking, like everybody has a different flavor. So I love to
Yes.
say witchcraft has many, 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 many flavors, right?
Yes,
Everybody has a different flavor, and you just have to find your flavor, right? Like
absolutely.
this is me. Okay, this resonates. Yeah.
So you go from this similar, it sounds like my similar upbringing of very, very Italian, we were Catholic, very Italian Catholic, like strict, blinders on, there's nothing outside of the upbringing. And then
Right.
you're like, oh, but what about this and what about that? So how do you go from that kid to I'm in Salem, my mind is being blown wide open, and then what happens on your path? You're 15, then what happens?
So then we have lots of really tense conversations with my parents who find my
No,
books and are like flipping out, like, oh my God,
no,
she's a Satanist. You know?
really?
Yeah. No, you know what though? I will tell you this. So now, right, flash forward like 25 plus years,
Right.
and my parents are like my biggest supporters. However, back when I was 15, they're like, whoa, what is happening here, right? Because this is all we know, right? I had a French background, like it was French Catholic, so it was same kind of thing though, like
Mm-hmm.
and it was very much like hush hush because my grandparents couldn't know about this because this would have been like,
Oh yeah,
right, like,
yeah.
oh, world shattering. So yeah, there was a whole, and I was already the black sheep of the family. Like, I was always the one on the outside. I was always like the black sheep. I was push the limits and ask the questions and, wanted to know why. And so yeah, so there's this whole like very tense time between like the ages of 13 and 16, 17, where my parents, I feel like, really thought, oh God, she's going to be like tattooed and end up in jail. I am tattooed, not in jail.
I mean, not for
um,
witchcraft anyway. Like,
No, but so I think it can, again, framing it right and you touched on this earlier about us being, kind of in that same generation, right? It was not really like the Salem witches were a thing, but outside of things, it was not really a thing, right? People grew up in neighborhoods and you were raised Catholic and you did your thing and you went to church every Sunday and that's life, right?
right.
And I went and rocked the entire boat of, well, I'm not going to church anymore. And I'm not sure that, confirmation's the right thing. And I don't like, whoa, like put on the brakes, right?
You did that? You literally told your parents confirmation might not be the thing for me?
Yep.
Okay, literally, you're my hero right now.
You know what, though?
You're,
Sadly, I was still confirmed.
well, of course, because you're 13 and your parents say
But
you have
yeah,
to do
no,
it, so you have
I
to
did.
show
I
up.
was like, I don't know that this is bad. I told the priest that too. I was like, I struggle with your philosophies of religion. I was really, I don't know how to explain it other than I was just really like firm on the fact early on in my life where that didn't fit. And there was
Wow.
much more, there was something much deeper, like, whether you want to call it like past life stuff or whatever it was, karmic stuff, there was a very deep sense within me that like, this is not how this goes. I don't know what you people are doing, but
Right.
we
But
need to
you
turn left.
knew from such an early age who you
Yeah.
were, what you
Yeah.
felt inside, and although you couldn't articulate it, you knew what didn't feel right to you
Right.
spiritually. I think
Yeah.
that level of self-awareness at such a young age is, like I said, you're kind of my fucking hero right now. Like
I
legit,
don't know
like
if I could do it here, but
I no, but that's
yeah.
amazing. Again, to know yourself at such a young age kind of sets you up for being
Right.
a kick-ass adult. Most of us don't get to that point until we're like in our 30s. So like,
No, I get it. Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you
It also,
remember? I'm sorry, go ahead.
sorry.
No, you
I was
go.
gonna say it was also tough because it's hard to be that self-aware and be surrounded by, 13 to 16-year-olds that, all they want to do is drink and get high and like,
Mm,
silly. And you're like, this is not all there is to life, So you
yeah.
try to like put on the show of, being, yeah, okay, I can be that person, but it's really hard. It was really hard. And
Yeah.
I did have periods of like depression and things through that time
Yeah.
because there weren't a lot of people that could relate to me. You know what I mean? And that I feel like can be tough, which I can now relate to. Like I see it in students and things when I'm working as a teacher. And I think it makes me set up well to connect with those kids because I
Yeah.
do understand what that was like. But it's tough. It's tough
Yeah.
to watch other kids go through that or, go through that yourself. But that actually, in the end, really started to fuel the book. So that like all of those experiences eventually led to, what came of it. So anyway, I'm sorry, but I interrupted you.
No, 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 no. That's incredible. And I think that you really you have to take into account those experiences as you go through whatever your working is in life. And most people, including myself, and as we're talking about this, we don't choose. We don't wake up one morning and go, I think I'm a witch. I think I'm a pagan. Like you just sort of you find it, or you go, this doesn't feel right, but this other thing does.
Yeah.
Or I'm not sure what this is, but I know that the path I'm on isn't the right one. And so I'm gonna
Right.
just look at this and look at that. And I think that's one of the things about, finding a pagan path that's so liberating
Mm-hmm.
because you don't have to fit into those rules, right? God, as you said, God isn't only in church, it's not just in this
Yeah.
box,
Right. It's not a box.
spirituality, divinity, energy. It's everywhere. It's not just in this building for an hour on Sundays. You know,
Right.
it's everywhere. And so you saying, it was like you were always like that kid that was on the outside going, being stupid. Why do you just want to like get high and get drunk? Like I identify with that a lot because I also was that kid. Like even in college, my friends went away and everybody came back and they had all been drinking and smoking. And I was like, this isn't fun. Like this isn't, why do you want to do this? It's not, and
Right.
right. And like, well, everybody's looking at me and they're like, wah, wah, she's so boring. Wah, wah. And I'm like,
Right.
I don't know. Let's go read cards under the full moon and let's go light some candles. There's a storm coming. Let's watch the
Right.
lightning, like, right. And everybody's like, oh, it's so weird. Like, maybe I am, but it's like the best kind of weird. But that you're right, because the societal norm, even little things like that, you don't fit,
Mm-hmm.
because you're over on this other little path. And then we go to someplace that's Salem and we find our people and we're like, oh, I'm
Right.
here.
Like, oh my God, they exist. There's other people like me.
Exactly, exactly. So you've been like, you would consider yourself a practicing witch since the age of 15? Since,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably fair. I feel like I dabbled in things for a lot of years first. Like
yeah.
I think most of us do. I read lots of books and started reading tarot and
Mhm.
started reading for my friends. That was blast. Like, oh my gosh. I had no
Right. And then
idea what I was doing, but
right.
I was really accurate apparently.
I mean,
um,
when you're good at something, right?
right. I would laugh. I would always be like I just thought I was making that up. Okay, cool. So yeah, so like dabbling in different things and just experimenting with stuff and realizing that there was some science behind this and that there was
Mm,
some something deeper. I still love that they're coming up with new scientific theories and things that we as witches have known and said for years, right? Like, oh, we can finally tell there's an aura. No, really? you know, but I love that because I'm like, look, confirmation people. I'm just saying
right.
there is actually science behind a lot of what we
Can you
do.
give us an
But yeah, so
example of one of those pieces of science that is something that really surprised you as you were learning it?
I feel like honestly, it had a lot to do with energies and auras and like the energetic field. Just the fact that science could finally, look at and prove that, even simple things like, I remember watching these experiments of, them like cutting a leaf, but then the leaf still feels like they could actually image it and see that the leaf still thought that part of itself was there or things like that. It gave a lot of
Wow.
um I think, foundation to that understanding that there's more at work than we realize, right? And just because people sometimes say, oh, well, that's just hogwash, or you're just making that up, or things like that. There's actually some more and more science, I feel like, all the time coming out that, says actually that might not be true. Like there is actually a connection there. There is something, the fact that people's energies and their auras, and like that we do give off these signals that we don't even realize sometimes that we're giving off. So one of the other things that was really significant for me around that age was, like most, children that are going through puberty, a lot of things happen and happen quickly. One of those things was a huge heightening of that psychic ability for me. And the fact that spirits were starting to talk to me and things were happening, and I was very empathic and didn't know what that was, or what it, what it entailed, or how to control that, right? It was very alarming to me because, feeling, anybody that senses other people's feelings and emotions and all of those things, like, it can be extremely overwhelming, especially at a teenage level when
you're feeling all of your own feelings, and now you're feeling everybody else's feelings, and everything feels like it's turned up to 11, and you're like, I can't, what? Being a teenager is hard enough. If you're empathic or psychic, like, it's just horrible.
It's almost frightening. It can be frightening. So just learning that, so having science and, like paranormal investigators and things like that start to be able to bring out some of this information that, like, hey, there really is something to a lot of this, I think just gives it further backing for a lot of witches and, pagans alike, that, like, there really is something connected to this, that, we're not just feeling it, it is actually, there is actually a lot to it. So a lot that we still don't understand. So
I love the science of it.
I wanted to touch on, just because you mentioned it a minute ago, and it's a question I get asked a lot, and I find it interesting. So a lot of people ask me, like, so when did you start identifying as a witch, or do you identify as a witch? And I had someone that was interviewing me recently ask me, so I see that you don't identify as a witch, and I said, well, actually, see, that's the thing. I feel like, just like there is, a lot of exploration in your own self, right, when you're learning and becoming, I feel like I ascribe to a lot of different titles, right? And I don't necessarily fall into one particular thing. So I do identify as a witch, but I also identify as pagan, and I also identify as, a priestess. So it just depends on really the hat that I'm wearing and the role that I'm taking on at that given moment. So does witch encompass a lot of that? Yes. Does spiritual practitioner also encompass a lot of that? Yep. So it just depends. But it's one of those weird things that people often go, like, that have read different things that I've written, or articles, or what. So do you identify as a witch or not? Like, yes, but no. Like, I don't like to be in a box ever.
Yes, agreed. And those terms get, for me, I flip-flop between witch and pagan, because a witch is someone who does anything that is a ritual, right? So anything that, anything that's practicing witchcraft means, like, literally anything that is a ritual. So, like, if you're washing your hands with intention, that's a ritual. If you're lighting birthday candles on a birthday cake and singing the same song at your birthday every single year, guess what, people? Ritual. Okay. Like, I know, right? Because it involves cake, right? So, like, but I'm also, I would say pagan, because I don't follow an organized Christian religion, right? So pagan is not following an organized pagan, not following an organized neo-Christian or Judeo-Christian religion. But I've got a bajillion different deities, hanging out on my altar. I've got, ancestors, I've got fairies, I've got, so same. Witch, pagan, to me, I use them interchangeably, know. And I like that you brought that up. Eclectic spiritual practitioner. And again, why we gotta pick a word? Like, can't we?
I know, right?
Today I feel more pagan-y. Tomorrow I might feel more witchy.
Exactly.
Why I gotta pick a word? So now I've totally lost my train of thought, because
I'm sorry. I know. I like
you're talking about the science of witchcraft and the science of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I just had to say, because you're into this sort of thing. One of the things that I love is the neuroscience that directly dovetails into witchcraft, right? So
Yeah.
if you read books on neuroscience, you read self-help books or business books or,
Yeah.
you know, any kind of meditation books, things that have been scientifically proven to
Yeah.
help, you know, manifest the life you want or
Right.
change your brain waves. Guess what, people?
Yeah. Don't you laugh? I always laugh. I love reading, especially in education. You know, we get a
Yeah,
lot of that stuff. And I always just chuckle. I'm like, you're okay. You know, you're talking about witchcraft, right? Just
right.
saying.
Right. Like, what's the first rule of witchcraft? Don't talk about witchcraft. It's
Right.
it's unbelievable the techniques that they teach when it comes to these sort of things.
Right.
You know, writing your goals. Okay,
Yeah.
that's witchcraft. You know, if you're perpetually writing a list of
Right.
manifestations and you're
Mm-hmm.
putting intention in, or, you know, all these things, like they are literally
Right. They're literally the practices of
they're
spelling.
literally the practices, right? So that brings me to the next question I want to ask you about. You have a degree in psychology, right? So in what way does your witchcraft or your paganism inform your background in psychology or vice versa?
So I think that probably is a really great question in the sense of, right, how does that influence or how did that influence me? So, like most people, I feel like there were a lot of, you know, traumas and things, right, that happened, like most of us, between the ages of, we'll say, 13 and, you know, 25, and just that whole process. And at that time was when I was also going through that minor in psychology and, you know, really delving into that and realizing I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't going to be my life. But it helped me to really frame, right, a lot of the things that still bothered me and I was still working through, right? It helped me frame a lot of the traumas. It helped me understand more deeply, like, why we behave the way we do, right? Because a lot of the, and I talk about this a lot in the 13 moons, but why do we perpetuate the same cycles? Why do we repeat the same behaviors, right? And how do we get to the core of those things? And so I feel like that's really where, for me, I was able to marry the psychology with the magic. So taking that underlying, right, subconscious recording, right, that we have that's repeating those patterns for us, right? And figuring out how to use magic to bring it to a place where it was tangible, right? Now it's not just this thing that's automatically operating, but we're really delving into it and getting to the core. And then we're doing something active about it, right? And that's the magic piece, right? We're able to take that and say, okay, how can I ritualize this to break the cycle? How do I then, you know, take it apart and unthread, you know, like think of it like a rope, right? How do I unwind all those pieces and then figure out which ones are the ones that I want to put back and which ones are the ones that no longer serve, right? That I don't need them.
Right.
So it's really, that's really where I started to practice on my own. Like I was taking some of those things that I was learning in psychology at that time and ritualizing them and using them on myself and, you know, practicing myself to try to heal some of those traumas and things that I realized I didn't want to live with for the rest of my life.
Right.
I didn't want that to dictate who I became in life, right?
Right.
And for me, it was really powerful and really effective. Um, and then somebody eventually somewhere along the lines, you know, in my travels was like, well, you should write a book about that. And I was like, really? Who wants to read about that?
Yes, yes, really. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break, hear from our sponsors, because when we get back from the break, I want to dive into your new book, which is In the Shadow of 13 Moons. And I really want to dig into that. It's awesome. We'll be right back after hearing from our amazing sponsors. We are back with the amazing Kimberly Sherman-Cook, and we are talking about her new book, In the Shadow of 13 Moons. And just before the break, you were discussing how your psychology background allowed you to sort of deal with some of the traumas of your life, like we all have traumas, and your witchcraft background allowed you to take that and ritualize it and heal some of those wounds. And that a lot of that is in this book. And for me, that's one of the things that is so important about my practice and my witchcraft. And I'm going to say this, people are going to get pissed at me. I say it all the time. Okay. You can't just light a candle, carry a stone with you, do whatever you're going to do, read a tarot card and be like, my trauma is healed. Like, it's just, you have to do the actual work
Yeah.
of people like, I'm doing shadow work right now because I didn't wear makeup to the grocery store and I hate my face without makeup. That's not shadow work. Okay. Shadow work is looking at the gritty, awful parts of yourself, your traumas,
Uh-huh.
all of those things, bringing them into the light.
Yeah.
And the witchcraft is half of it,
Hmm.
but real therapy and real psychological work and real mental health is the other part of it,
Right.
right? So, one of the things that I love about what you're talking about here is how you marry them and how you use them both together to create healing. So, let's
Right.
talk a little bit about this book because you focus a lot on, well, first of all, what do you mean the shadow of the 13 moons?
So In the Shadow of 13 Moons came about because the book is all related to using the dark moon and new moon cycle as opposed to the full moon cycle. So we are on the shadow side of the moon. So that is how we came to the title of the book. And if you read it, there's like, you're not going to hang out in the light very much.
Which again, so fucking important. Okay. Like, so, and that's something I wanted to ask you about. Like, so many witches and pagans really focus on full moon, right? Her energy, how we're drawing in that light, blah, 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 blah. And listen, I do that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I find more potent magic
Yeah.
around the dark moon, right? So, can you talk a little bit to people who might not know what are the differences in the energies around full moon versus dark moon?
Sure, absolutely. So when we talk about the full moon, of course, everybody thinks about, standing under the full moon and like, kumbaya and kind of like, I know that's like dramatic, but we do. We like, we're honoring her, we're singing to her, we're absorbing that energy. It's very light, it's very airy, it's fluffy kind of, it's powerful, but in a, manifesting way that's like not so much, well, so people focus on it as if it's a manifesting moon, right? But it's really the manifesting you do before that. It's just the culmination of it. So it's really more like culmination kind of energy than it is truly manifesting. If we really want to manifest, we got to back it up like 14 days and start right after when you get to the new moon. So that leads us to that other side of the energy. So once the full moon has passed, we're actually going into like these constant like mini cycles. So if we think about the wheel of the year, right? We talk about the light half of the year and the dark half. The moon cycle is really that same thing. So we're talking about the light half of the moon cycle, right? Where we're growing and then we peak. But then we go down to the dark half of the cycle. So we're, minimizing that energy. So the energy when it's waning starts to feel, I feel like a little bit more introverted, right? So it kind of draws you back in a little bit. So let's take another look. Where are we at now? Do we need something is there something new we need to look at or manifest? Or what are the problems with what we tried to manifest? What do we need to work on, right? So it's asking us really to look at that. And then the dark moon itself, to me, has always felt like, I think I describe it in the book like this, but it's like an inky purple energy is how I can describe it. It's much thicker. It has like a different viscosity, so to speak. It's, more almost like blankety. It feels like it kind of blankets you, right? Whereas, the full moon is more like, we're up here. The dark moon is much more like, okay, come on in. Like, I'm going to draw you in, but we're going down, right? We're going down into the underworld. We're going to really look at what's going on. And it's not for everybody, right? Because that's a tough place to be, right? To lay yourself bare and strip off all of the masks that we wear in the outside world and really look at ourselves and really look at that energy, right? And the things those are the cycles that are functioning, right? Constantly functioning. And those are the cycles that ultimately power that lighter half. And so it's a tough place to go sometimes, right? And not everybody
Absolutely.
likes the feeling of that. But I feel
Absolutely.
like, much like you, it's some of the most potent and powerful magic. And it was
Yeah.
probably the one thing that was missing from my practice, which is, I think, how I ended up starting to kind of marry these two things together, right? Was because,
Right.
again, we go back to, I told you, I question everything all the time, even now as an adult. And I was like, this is like great. Everything's full moon, like light, happy, everybody on. What about the rest of the full moon? What about the rest of the cycle? What else?
Yeah.
What are we missing? I felt like there was this pocket, this hole that nobody wanted to talk about,
Yeah.
right? Because it was somehow like dark or bad or, that kind of thing. And of course, so what did I do? I was like, ooh, let's dive in. Like,
Well, yeah,
what's
because
over here?
people are, listen, human beings are kind of like programmed to be afraid of the dark,
Yeah.
things we can't see, what's hiding in there that might jump out and get me. So I'm gonna just kind of grit my teeth and bear it and get through the dark time until the light's gonna arrive again. But I
Right.
have learned similarly, I feel a peace around the dark moon. I feel quiet and introspective,
Yeah.
and that it is time to kind of just hang out with me and go, okay, how you doing? Let's check
Right.
in, right? And for just my own personal self, like I'm very extroverted and I'm very animated and I'm always go, 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 go. It's just my
Yep.
lifestyle. Dark moon allows me to go, okay, can we have a minute? Can we
Yep.
check in? Um, and similarly, I have found that in my adulthood, since probably the age of 34, that I'm much more comfortable in those spaces instead of the full moon kind of energy and hey and illuminate everything. Like I can do that, and I do that in my daily practice,
Right.
in my life. But the dark moon is for me,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I love that you are focusing on the darkness and the inner working. You talk a little bit in the book about dark deities.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I'm curious about this concept of dark deities for you, because I think people would have a negative connotation to that.
Right. So I think a lot of us tend, anything that says dark,
Yep.
right, we associate with evil. Dark equals evil stuff, right? But it's not. I mean, we're talking about the dark moon. We're talking about, working in those underworld energies, working in that really deep sense of self, right? Really
Yep.
reflecting on ourselves. And so the dark deity is really what we're referring to is the darker aspect, right? If we really, I told you I'm a history buff, you really delve into some of those myths, right? Athena is not always light and bright and happy.
No.
She has a very dark side, right? And there's a lot of deities like that we kind of shy away from. And the reason we shy away from them is because they represent those pieces that we don't want to look at. They call to our attention, like, and you're not getting away from them, right? Like once you have engaged, they're going to be there with the 2x4 to whack you if you don't get it, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
people, I feel like, are not necessarily, we're not trained to accept that directness as a society, right? Even in witchcraft, we like to focus on the light and the bright and the positive reinforcement and the positive energy and da, 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 da. It goes on and on and on. But really, if we want a full experience witchcraft, we also have to be willing, just like our ancestors were. Like these deities didn't come from nowhere. Our ancestors didn't practice with these darker deities once in a while if they kind of felt like itching on it. Like they delved into that, right?
Yeah.
And we have to remember that we can also do that in balance, right? We have to be able to be willing. And I feel like there's a couple of things happening there, right? You have to be willing. You have to be willing to sacrifice, and you have to be willing to face the truth, right? And those three things can be really tough. That's why we tend to avoid them, I feel like. And that's also why I actually intentionally did not change that, because that came to my attention too, that like, if I call them dark deities, like, are people going to flip out because, oh my God, now somehow they're practicing something like, like, and I will say that that's like that, sort of like an immature sense of witchcraft where it's like, it's black magic, it's white magic, it's gray magic. Like, no, it doesn't really exist, right? But I feel like for a newer practitioner, like that's still in that frame, like they could feel like, oh my God, What did she
Yeah.
just say? Yeah, seriously, right? But I intentionally left it because on some level, I also knew that the people who were intended for this book, the people who wanted what I had to offer or wanted what the magic had to offer them, would find their way there. Just like we were talking about, like, you know, you go to Salem and like you find this particular shop and you're like, oh, my
Yes.
people, right?
Yes.
So if they're my people, if they want to get down and dirty, right, with the underworld, then they're going to be like, yeah, okay, Dark Deity's got it. We can do this.
I think you really hit the nail on the head with balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's something that is so important in witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
And as you pointed out, isn't always focused upon. You know, we're like, oh, I'm in balance with the elements. That's great. But the truth is, if we are following the moon, right? You can't have a full moon without a dark moon.
Right.
Right. And if we are she and she is us, we have all of that within us. We have that light, we have that dark. And therefore, all the deities and all the spirits as well. We are all creatures of everything. We're not just one thing, right? So you have to be able to lean in and recognize that you can't ignore that darkness or that you know, I don't, like you said, I don't know what
it out and put it in a box somewhere.
Right, like, and that's what we'd call it, right? I mean, it is, if we have lightness in us, then we also have darkness in us. If we have love in us, then we also have anger in us. That is the nature of life, is life and death and cycles, right? And what better to represent that than the cycles of the moon and these deities that have duality.
Absolutely. And I feel like if you are willing to listen and you're willing to tap into them and you're willing to be brave enough to say, like, okay, show me how to change, show me how to evolve, they can take you places that ultimately lead to really positively freeing up that energy permanently. Not just like for this moment, not just for this cycle, but really make lasting changes in your life where it's not just a temporary thing. And they become our allies. You know, we realize and we recognize that, you know, it's not about, you know, dark and light, black and white. It's about what I need right now in order to learn and grow as a human being and as a spiritual person and like all of those things, right? And in doing that, we have that balance. And that's actually one of the things I talk about, like, later in the book, as you get on in your journey, is that understanding of like, you're literally going down into the underworld and pushing through this because you're going to come back up the other side, right? Like, just like the slumber of winter, you know, those seeds are slumbering. They're in there. They're buried in the earth, but in the spring they emerge, right? And you will eventually emerge with all of this energy that is now freed up and that you can take and manifest something new with, right? And that's ultimately like what we all want to achieve, right? You know, like going back to what you said earlier, like, it's the piece that changes is the doing the work. You know, you're not just lighting the candle and walking the stone and going like, life's going to be ducky. You know, you're actually going in there and you're saying like, okay, I'm ready for this. Like, hit me with it. Like, what do I need to do? How do I get to the core of whatever it is and push that envelope so that I can come out the other side? Right.
Amazing.
So ultimately it becomes that balance, right? You know, it's always about emerging back into the light. One of my biggest pet peeves in psychology in general, but also it's better now, but back in the day, and also about witchcraft too, in general, is that sense of, well, just lock it up, put it on a shelf, put it in a box, you know, cut it out of your life. And, you know, my philosophy and the road that I took was marry it, get partnered with it, really know it, embrace it, love it, because it's beautiful. It is a piece of you that helps you see life and the world in a different lens. There's nothing wrong with that, but we do need to fix the fractures, right? You need to fix it so that you're not trying to separate. You know, you're trying to bring it back together and marry those energies together.
Right, because and when you're talking about that, I'm hearing the words like, you know, trauma and abuse and things like that, like real, you know, grief, right? Those human experiences that we go through, that practices of witchcraft can really help us heal.
Right.
And you don't get over it. You don't get over those kind of things. Like
Right.
you don't just like you said, there's a lot of witchcraft that's like, oh, let's just cut it out, or cut the cord, cut the cord, cut the cord. I've
Yeah.
done 100 bajillion cord cuttings with negative family members, and guess what? They grow back overnight. It's
Right.
not something that you can just energetically surgically remove.
Right.
It's I love this idea of acceptance
Yeah.
and like you said, the word marrying it, seeing it for what it is, accepting it for what it is, and being able to say, I can see you and accept you and heal you, and you can remain because you can no longer harm me.
Right. Because I don't have to be you. I can
Right,
just know that you are a piece of my experience.
right.
Right. And so it's, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really, really beautiful. Is there one or two, maybe, of these dark deities that when you were writing this book, particularly were meaningful to you, or that or surprised you in terms of your working or your research on this book?
So I think most people would be not surprised to say that the Morrigan has been
Mm,
with me for many, many, many years. I do consider myself her priestess, but not just her. There were a lot of deities that spoke through that time. One of the surprising ones that most people would probably not expect was Aphrodite. Was one. Yep. And also Persephone. So
Persephone
a
I would
lot of
get, but
the, yeah, like,
Aphrodite I find
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, there were a lot of, there were others too. I can't remember them all at this point. But there were many that really kind of guided, that understanding of, how to go about healing different aspects and what kinds of trauma were important and how do you get to the core of those things, and just really kind of guiding there's a lot of, I did a lot of meditation with different deities over time. It was a long time, so this book came about, it wasn't like an immediate thing. It was something, practice of mine that I started as personal practice, and then it moved into practicing with others because they wanted to know what I was doing and how to do these things. And they found it valuable, and they were like, you need to write this. You need to put this out there for people.
Yeah.
People need this. And I was like, I don't know about that. And so I did start writing it. So it was like a 7-year like journey, you know. So it wasn't like a quick and immediate thing where like, oh, I'm going to download this information and put it out there. It was, a lot of it was tried and tested and tweaked and changed over time. So
Well, it's an amazing book, and it's an amazing work to really dive deep into the shadow work and the dark moon work, and all this stuff that people generally don't want to talk about, but you
right.
present it in a way that it's beautiful and it's accessible, and it's really, what's the word I'm looking for? It's, I want to say, personal,
Yeah.
but what I mean is to touch me, right? So yes, it's your personal experience, but it feels like you're talking to my personal experiences.
Right.
You
And
know
that
what
was,
I mean?
yeah. And I'm actually,
Intimate is the word.
I'm glad you said that, because that was ultimately my hope in putting the work out there, was that, I would be able to help or, guide somebody else just simply by, I wanted it to be sort of conversational. It's almost like you're sitting down having a conversation with a friend. It's not judgy. It's not, you know, uh, strict or restricting. Like, I wanted it to really feel like, I can give you this information and you can make it you. You can make it
Yeah.
your own. It's not it's not dogmatic in any way. So I'm glad that you actually said that. That makes me feel good.
Yeah, really. And again, like, the subject matter is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's really wonderful. In the Shadow of 13 Moons by Kimberly Sherman-Cook. Kimberly, where can everybody find you, find your work? How can we stalk you online? Where can we buy your book?
Stop me, please. I do have, so I have a Facebook, and I'm trying to, I lose all of it. So I'm terrible with all these, like, different like handles and things that you have. But if you look me up, I am on Facebook. I am also on Instagram, though I'm terrible at posting on Instagram, but I'm trying to get better at that. I do have a Facebook page. Not Facebook. Well, yeah, I have a Facebook page. I have an author page, and then I have my personal page. So either one of those. The author page I feel like is Manicat Moon, which is a nod to Nantucket, where I spent some time. Because I couldn't, for whatever reason, do it under my name. I don't know. Wouldn't let me do it. But it is my author page. I do have a YouTube channel as well, where I do monthly dark moon readings.
Love it.
So I give people like insights on the energy of, what maybe would be good to focus on in that given month, or, what the energies look like for that given month. So I started doing that this year. So you can certainly look me up on YouTube. And then I also have my website, which is KimberlySherman-Cook.com. So any of those. And I blog post there.
Where can we buy the book?
The book you can buy, I think, at any major retailer. However, Crossed Crow is the publisher currently. They are amazing. You can buy it in hardcover. You can also buy it in the softcover. The hardcovers are autographed by me. Yes, they have autographed cards in them, and they're beautiful. They have a beautiful cover. I designed the cover, and then they helped me sort of make that come to life. So they're amazing.
Amazing. Wow.
They are an amazing publisher.
And of course, wherever books are sold, you can buy In the Shadow of 13 Moons. Support your local bookstores, support your local metaphysical shops. Just walk in there and say, hey, I want to buy this book. Can you order it for me? Sure, they can. Absolutely, they can. Okay, Kimberly, I have one final question for you.
Okay.
And I ask this question to everyone who comes on the show. It has nothing to do with anything we talked about. If you could have me as a kitchen witch make you one magical meal, what would it be and why?
Oh my goodness. That is a big question.
A big question.
Let me think. I don't know. See, now that is amazing. What would I have you make for me? I am so eclectic when it comes to food. Like anything is good.
But what's your favorite dish, or something you haven't had in a million years, or something you had once on vacation that blew your mind, or something specific to one of the deities that you've been working with,
Completely stumped me.
But
because I'm such a foodie. I love food. Like, I don't know, you could put anything in front of me and I'd be like, let's try this. So I would have to say it would have to be like a comfort food. I am a big fan of comfort food. So like, amazingly, probably like tomato soup and grilled cheese. I know that sounds super simple, but
no,
that is just one of those like soul-feeding, yummy, wrapped up in a blanket at home on a fall day in New England. I mean, it's just things New England.
And something you must know is that I am a whore for grilled cheese. Like grilled cheese is like one of my favorite foods. I have a grilled cheese sandwich recipe for every season. Like my fall grilled cheese sandwich is sharp cheddar cheese, black forest ham or bacon, sliced fresh apples, and then it's grilled in rosemary oil.
Okay, so when are you coming to make this for me?
So it's and then like I like to tomato soup, of course, but like with that I like a butternut squash soup, and I dunk it in the butternut squash soup, right? Yeah. So like, right, but like a traditional roasted tomato and red pepper soup with like just like I would do like a white cheddar cheese for you, and like some sort of a buttery, garlicky crust to dunk in. And now I'm fucking starving. So
now you need to come down here and make that for me.
Seriously. Amazing. Kimberly Sherman-Cook, you are incredible. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. This was awesome. Go get the book In the Shadow of 13 Moons. Go get the book. And all of your notes and information and links will be at the bottom of the show notes. So anybody who missed it before, you just go on and click. And until next time, everyone, I wish you so many blessings and so much gratitude. Thank you so much.